Okay, we are live.
Yep, we're good.
So should I pull up the chart and then we'll talk about your thing?
Yeah, I'm really like I was staring at just the chart of the day, trying to figure out where this little insight download thingy came from.
Right.
And so I was doing the news scan, which I normally do, just to kind of see what's playing out, in the collective. And I ran across an article talking about William Shatner because he was able to go up to space with not Bezos, the other guy.
Elon Musk.
No. Richard
No,
Branson.
Zuckerberg.
No, the other like quadrillionaire, Richard Branson. And he was saying how he went into it with these expectations of like being super, that he would be like happy to see Earth and was really excited about the experience. And he ended up feeling like the life had been sucked out of him. Like he felt so sad and so depressed and realized just how vulnerable the planet is. And like it was words are failing me right now, but it sounds like that for him this was one of those experiences. I mean, life changing, obviously. I mean, humans in space, a civilian in space on top of that.
Yeah.
But that like it was significant enough that I would say if this had happened to him 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we may not have had the William Shatner we know as the actor, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Oh, totally.
So like I was, as I was reading this, it dawned on me like an additional exploitation of resources, or like exploitation of maybe newly discovered resources or new resources that haven't been, taken advantage before, and people doing so for like technology and power. So I was looking at the chart trying to figure out, all right, how would this really be playing out, from getting this? Because a lot of the times what I'm noticing with astrology, especially because I went to tarot first, so I'm super tapped into my intuition, I'll get these weird downloads that make absolutely no sense until something plays out in the collective. And then I'm like, oh, that's what that was talking about, right? And then the transits end up backing up some of this stuff. Sometimes, obviously it's not right all the time, but I was curious what in the chart would basically back up what I was getting. So I was looking at Saturn and Aquarius, and then I figured because, money, resources, especially anything from the Earth, you're looking at Taurus second house. So automatically then you're looking at Venus, right? And then you brought up earlier that you would also want to look at the 8th house because it's on that axis, and look at Scorpio as well. So yeah, that's the backstory for those listening.
I love that. That feels to me to be really relevant. I was zooming in on the sense of disillusionment. Like he's going out into space, which is that super, it's like the Saturn Uranus thing of like piercing the bounds of the known reality, right? Like he's experiencing beyond the limits of his known.
Yeah.
Right? There's this great quote by this philosopher Pascal, who, it's a quote that I really like. He says, God is the cultural limit, right? And I think that's a perfect representation of what Saturn is, right? It's the cultural limit of our knowledge. Again, right? If you think about the farthest the human eye can see, right? Saturn is literally the limit in terms of our perception. And breaking that border and bounds, super Uranus, North Node, Mars kind of deal, right? It's like breaking out into outer space, and then the disillusionment of going beyond those bounds and realizing this sense of like deep and profound emptiness.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of a class I took with Achuta, how he was talking about, like, he mentioned that basically Saturn is the representation of the liminal. And that like rocked my freaking brain, because we talk about that a lot in, quote unquote, esoteric studies and sciences, right? Especially when you get to things like card reading or, psychic abilities, you're basically piercing the liminal. So like to see that Saturn, with, all its glory in being the taskmaster, to actually be something so spiritual as representing the liminal space. Just like, I think I'm still digesting that. You know?
That's an appropriate way to put it. The liminal space. I think I would challenge that a little bit and say that it's the end of space and time itself, right? It's the furthest reaches that we can conceptualize. It's not that like there is such a thing ultimately as space and time, right? But it's a relativity, right? And Saturn is like that bounds of relativity. It's like this sphere of perception, insofar as we can like, insofar as we can grasp it. I'm pulling up the chart thing right now. So what he flew into space October 13th, 2021, 10 a.m. Eastern time from Van Horn, Texas.
That sounds right.
Okay. So I should have. And do you know when the interview was?
Oh, I can find out really quick.
We can do 3 charts.
Oh, that's badass. Yeah, so he flew on Blue Origin, and then it sounds like I'm trying to find like who originally reported it.
Yeah, because it sounds like the reflection aspect of it is a really important part of the chart. That there was this sense of disillusionment that came maybe in reflection.
Yeah. It's the thing about US news. It's I feel like no one does really anything original, so it makes it really hard to find an original article. But I'm thinking about 5 days ago, and it looks like Variety would be
Okay, nice.
the media company that took that interview.
So that's why it's news now as opposed to in it says from his book.
Yeah, I guess he wrote a book about it. Which I'm kind of curious to read now, just because of those few very striking quotes that they took from it and like what he said about his experience. I'm super curious now to see what the book says, but so many on that list to read.
I'm interested to see now because like the sense of the profound emptiness, that's super I guess we can just pull up the chart for now and do that. The sense of profound emptiness to me is definitely the Mars Neptune square. The I would say right now, right, with that square is like a period of profound disillusionment this year. You can see on the third ring, right, or the third rung of the chart.
Yeah.
I don't know where Mars is in aspect to that initial launch. Okay, so it's just a little beyond the opposition. Where is it? Let's see. Yeah, just a little out of orb of the opposition.
Okay,
So
it
what do you
looks like the October 13th. Did you grab that already? For when he launched? Yeah, you did. Okay.
Yeah. That's the middle ring, and the inner ring is his natal.
Okay, perfect. Let's see here. Oh, that's super interesting. So he has Saturn natally in the 12th.
Yes, which was conjunct Pluto, and conjunct the moon, and conjunct Saturn, roughly, on the day of the launch.
Interesting.
And now, right, Pluto is now conjunct his moon. There's the signature. There's the signature. Or no, Pluto is now conjunct the moon and Saturn or Pluto's now conjunct the moon, the moon and Pluto on the day of the launch, as well as his natal Saturn.
So you could almost say, like, given what I should say, the things that Saturn can represent, especially with this idea of if you do the work that Saturn is asking you, it rewards you. So like almost this disillusionment of him thinking, okay, this is a huge reward. Saturn's giving me, okay, and I might be oversimplifying, but then to realize that the reward is not as sweet as he thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean the Pluto transit, which is obviously still ongoing, and I guess this Pluto transit started maybe a year before the launch, a little more or less.
Mm-hmm.
No, way more than that, 2-3 years. That would to me signify a sense of profound disillusionment or erasing again, right? The conjunction that we actually had in the collective is mirroring the transit that he's having, right? The Saturn Pluto conjunction in the
Mm-hmm.
collective Capricorn is mirroring the transit that he's having with his own. He himself had a Saturn return, right, where Saturn and Pluto were conjunct his natal Saturn during his Saturn return. That's intense.
That is intense.
Yeah, I think we might just do best doing these two. You don't really need the one that's going on right now because we can see the signature right here. I mean, this is definitely what it is to me. Let's see if we can. Oh no, it's gonna do all this crap. Let's see if I can manipulate this chart a little bit. We're gonna need more like 2019. The interesting thing about the Pluto transits, I think, right, is the gravity. And I mean, I haven't had my Saturn return yet myself, right? I have
Mm-hmm.
Pisces 5 for Saturn. So I
Okay.
mean, it's technically happening now, really. It's really running up. And I mean, I think Saturn return in my 7th and 8th house, I'm definitely getting that. You know, I can't really. I wonder if this actually happened right in the like it did. Right at the beginning of 2020. But the space launch was 2021.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Saturn returns are interesting.
That is
I think
ugly.
it's
Look,
better if you're actually like, I would say, somewhat aware of what is, coming or what could happen. Like, I was not aware whatsoever when I hit my Saturn return, and I think because of that, that's what led me into that dark night process that
right.
took fucking forever because I was fighting it. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously it was a learning experience, as most of these things usually are, and you can grow from it if you choose to, but like, to go right from your Saturn return into a dark night process is fucking intense, man.
What? So, I mean, I like to think I'm at least a little bit aware, but I'm still feeling the fuck out of it, honestly. And this is his third one. I mean, like
Yeah.
at a certain point, you got to be like, I'm just done. You know, like how many Saturn returns do I have to get the memo? And this one's conjunct Pluto and Venus. You know, so like
Yeah.
this is all going on, and the Pluto transit's really going nowhere. Pluto's still on his Saturn. It's still within a
Hmm.
5-degree orb of his freaking Saturn. So like that makes sense to me what he's saying. I if I had a Pluto Saturn transit that was lasting that long, I would be absolutely disillusioned. I feel pretty damn disillusioned right now.
Yeah. It does. Like, like I said, I've got this natally, and because of where it's sitting in my chart, it's always in regards to power dynamics and relationships. And there is always some type of like shedding of, belief structures of some sort, basically with every person I get romantically involved with, or even like
Yeah.
attempt to. Just why I've just stopped now because it's annoying.
I
But
think the Pluto 7 and the Pluto 4 have a very similar journey in that sense. It's all about shedding emotional attachments and realizing a personal sovereignty.
mhm.
But on that note, right, I think here's the other piece of the puzzle. He has natally. No. Yeah, that's crazy. The Pluto opposite Saturn natally, right? So his Pluto polarity point is conjunct the Saturn return with Pluto.
Mhm.
So this is what he's integrating, right? This literal Pisces disillusionment. I'm sure this is what played out for the vast majority of his life in the world.
Yeah.
the sixth house stuff, and it's just the transition between 6 and 12. I'm sure whenever he has those Saturn returns, right? Whenever he had them, I'm sure there was a little bit of a jolt.
Yeah.
This sixth house Pluto power placement. And it began to be referred a little more and more to this 12th, a little bit of the breaking of the everyday.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I keep looking at his Mars too, his natal Mars, like wondering how that's coming into play or will come into play, you know, based on his most recent experience of, you know, going into space. Like, are we going to see a more of an activist Shatner coming out? Is he going to get more vocal? You know, how's that going to play out, especially with Pluto still sitting where it's sitting in its transit to everything else going on in his chart?
Well, let's see. I'm going to pull up the Jeffrey Wolf Green Pluto book. Let's see if I can share that.
Word.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see Pluto in the 6th.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there you are with your analysis of the Mars. I mean,
Huh.
I don't know how much time he has left in terms of the third Saturn return, but
Right.
it would certainly seem to me like that level of disillusionment, the breaking the bounds of the Saturn and kind of realizing the nothingness, you know, it would kind of invert him back into that service.
Right. Yeah, I was in one of the articles I was reading, because it wasn't the original one. They've been reproducing this story for a couple of days at this point, but it was talking about how many people, you know, astronauts who've gone into space, they all come back with this idea of the observer effect of realizing just how fragile the Earth is. And it's like, I don't know, I found some degree of resonance with that. Like, I've never been to space. I'll probably never go to space. Realistically, I don't even have a desire because I don't like heights, especially combined with fast speeds, right? Um, but, you know, as someone who works with the natural earth a lot as a gardener, you notice those small, minute changes in how things are growing, how they taste, how tender they are, how many bugs there are trying to get to it before you can, like all these little things. So it's interesting that, for one, that he was so public about his experience and his feelings after the fact. Um, because I can't recall really a time hearing about other astronauts being as clear and concise about this idea of the observer effect and how it played out for them after coming back.
Yeah, this to me is like Saturn Pluto Pisces effect. So let me read this really quick. Has been teaching these individuals to pierce the balloon of their own self-inflated specialness or importance. The piercing of this balloon has induced necessary evolutionary lessons of humility and self-purification. They've been learning that the universe does not revolve around them, and that there is much more concerning the totality of their reality than just the reality that can be seen from the center of their own pyramids. So Shatner is like the actor or whatever, right, with this whole Hollywood cult of celebrity going on or whatever, really doing, I'm gonna say doing something meaningless, right? Like I personally don't care that much for actors or Hollywood culture. I just think it's kind of a theater of stupidity, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
sure, I'm sure his work was entertaining for a lot of people, and I'm sure it's like brought a little bit of cultural value to the abyss of the landscape that is American industrial culture, right? But like,
Right.
what is that really worth, right? In the grand scheme of what I think we are seeing and observing here, in terms of what I would say is right, the piercing the bubble or piercing the balloon effect, which is literally that piercing of the bubble or the balloon of Saturn in
Mm-hmm.
the Piscean Plutonian way, 12th house. Mars is there obviously as well, right? In his natal. But in that piercing, the kind of humbling that comes with that, and the necessary kind of evolution of the soul that's going to come with that and needs to come with that, right? With the realization of some sort of like higher value or something that's much bigger than he is, and it sounds like much bigger than he thought the world was.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, right? Because I have a lot of Saturn and Pisces themes, I think, that are playing out for me right now as Saturn is, right, as we look in the transits, making its way through. Where is the?
I think it's still.
Well, we have to go to now. Yeah, making its way through Aquarius into Pisces. This is kind of the axis right now, right? Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. It sounds like that's what we're talking about. The Saturnian, the collective, into the whole or the total.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing everything from, you know, the ground, or how do I say this? So like the viewpoint, how, you know, people will always look ahead and sometimes they'll look down, but they rarely look up, kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
So like this is his version of being forced to look up.
That movie, Don't Look Up.
To look up, kind of like the movie.
Yeah, that movie, Don't Look Up, came out with Saturn and Aquarius. It's being forced to look up, right? This is the Saturn and Aquarius is the witnessing, right? It's like seeing the whole for what it is, right? Seeing the whole structure, as opposed to being ensconced within like a social or communal or cultural or societal vision of what the world is or what life is, which is definitely a Capricorn Saturn affair. Right, because here that we're in the house of Uranus, right? And obviously we have the Saturn Uranus square. It's kind of blowing the doors off and blowing the doors open of Saturn.
You know, one other thing that they said in the article was that there is actually research going on right now trying to figure out how to bring, quote unquote, this idea of the observer effect experience to everyday people who are never going to go to space. So as far as like the technology that would be required for us to realistically be able to give people that type of experience feels very Aquarian.
Yeah, and I wonder
that exists.
Well, right, and I wonder what that technology ultimately is, because people have been having that experience for thousands of years, and that's like that's the realm of the mystics and the seers. It's the transcendental.
Right.
That's this Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces.
Okay.
And we've been under the influence of that transit. That happened earlier this year, and right, Jupiter is literally about to ingress over the next week back into Pisces.
Right.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's what this is to me, right? Like inducing the observer or the witness consciousness. But that's something that comes through like the term like psychedelic means, it just means a revelation of the psyche, right? Like a psychedelic experience, which effectively blows the doors off of the previously believed reality, right? So all of this stuff here would be stuff like, right, we were talking about drugs, it'd be like LSD or heroin or mushrooms or something like that, right?
Ayahuasca, that's a big one right now.
Which one? What'd you say?
Ayahuasca.
Yeah, right. All of that's the realm of Neptune in Pisces. Any kind of psychedelic or transcendental experience is going to fall into that realm. So I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, just thinking like it's interesting, because like you're saying, like that this whole idea of the observer experience or whatever, that's really not that new. Anyone who works with the natural world has had that to some degree. You know what I mean? Not, you know, I would say as striking as literally seeing our bright blue planet, you know, with a black backdrop. But to some degree, you still have that. So like using technology to try to mimic the transcendental, I don't know if that's the right word.
Right. Well, effectively what Shatner had, right, by way of technology, this space shuttle launch, is he had like a technologically induced psychedelic experience, right? So what that would be is like the revelation of the psyche is really nothing more or less than the revelation of the cosmos, right? It's the microcosm, macrocosm thing. It's the same thing as like, I'm sure when you came into astrology and started to kind of have that realization that like the above and the below, right? It's not just like a kind of a Gnostic saying, it's much more of like a practical reality, right? Like I think that in itself is kind of an earth-shattering experience to have, right?
Oh yeah, definitely is. Like it changes your worldview for sure. And like especially in American culture, the things that are considered important, the things that are considered news, the hustle culture and all that bullshit, it really just does not matter once you have that like type of realization, you know?
Yeah. It's kind of his like breaking out of the matrix moment or something.
Literally.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see what needs to happen for people to get to that point, right? And so for me, what I'm getting is a whole lot of that Pluto Saturn on every level of this chart. I'm just going to do these two. And I mean, there's nothing like a Pluto Saturn Jupiter Mars natal. I mean, nothing like a Pluto Saturn Jupiter Mars collective transit. I mean, everything about that big, direct transformation of structures. Right? Like we're just one word reading off the list of those archetypes, right? Like that's that 2020 transit to me. But it's just interesting to see, right? How can you technologically induce something that I think a lot of people don't even want anyway?
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
Those that are asleep sometimes prefer to be there.
Yeah, because what it would involve is, right, like I've been dealing with this, I think, a lot with people in my life is like, right, you can give anyone all of those tools to have that kind of experience, but if they don't want to have it, they're not going to have it, right? They're going to do everything they can to resist it, because what it involves is like a death of the known.
Yeah.
Right. So that's effectively what he had, right? And I'm sure if going into that, right, you said he thought he was going to have some sort of like whole joyous thing. I'm sure he knew going into that exactly what it would entail, right? That kind of Pluto transit element, the burning fields, right? That aspect of it. It's like, if he knew that that's what it was going to entail, he probably would have done everything he could to avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
You know?
It's almost in human nature to be naturally repulsed to finding out or discovering new things. Like, and it's really the few people in our species, I would say, that say, yeah, fuck that, I'm gonna go look anyway. And they let the curiosity get the best of them. We all benefit from it, right?
There's no running from the Pluto transit. I'm just going to show you my chart really quick because I think you'll think this is funny. This is my whole Pluto thing, right? So that's just like,
cow. Oh yeah, my gosh.
I was born on moon solar eclipse, total solar eclipse in Scorpio, right? In the Pluto house. So like, it's interesting that we're talking about all these themes, right? And you and I resonate so much with this Pluto, Saturn, and Scorpio theme that you have as well. And I think that's where we really connect and bond. Because when it comes to stuff like this, I think the experience that William Shatner is having is probably something that's a little more around the realm of the everyday for you and me.
Oh, totally.
Right? Like, William Shatner's disillusionment at looking at the Earth and space and realizing just like the smallness of human existence is something that I wake up in the morning and that's like my first thought. You know, I don't have to go to outer space for that.
Right? Oh my God. For me, it's literally just stepping outside and observing, you know, the animals and the insects, which I'm not a fan of insects. I understand their need, you know, on our Earth. They all play a part in the bigger cycle, but just sitting there and observing that, like observing nothing but nature doing its thing, which for some people is like watching paint dry. You know what I mean? But I find it fascinating, like looking at the cycles of when the bees come in and out and the different types of bees and when they come and when they leave. And yeah, it's all super fascinating and makes us feel so minuscule for all the things that we have to use so much brain power to do. And it's automatic among the natural world. And that's fucking fascinating to me.
it's a way of seeing, right? So I
Yeah.
think if we look at William Shatner's life, right, and I'm not sitting here trying to play God or anything, right? But like if I lived his life, I would have felt that my life had been fundamentally meaningless up until this point. Right. And I'm sure that like in one way or another, that's what he experienced in terms of the literal words that he used. Right. This kind of horror at the emptiness of what he previously thought was true. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, not to throw shade at William Shatner by any means, right? But what we're talking about, right? This kind of observation of nature and the necessity of that in relationship to what we consider to be modern human culture and society, right? Which is really a huge the whole Pluto Saturn thing conjunct in Capricorn is kind of like the revelation of these kind of rotted out foundations of hyper materialism and all these power structures that are really based around control, right?
Yeah.
Like what does it really mean? Where's the beauty? Where's the natural in that? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a little bit of kind of the problem here that I think we're having with this Saturn Uranus square. Too many charts.
That was a lot of charts.
Yeah, I think I draw the line at 3. Having 4 out there is just a lot.
I did not even know that that was possible. I've got like super janky chart software.
Oh, this was worth it for me. If you when you have the money, Astro Gold is worth it. If you're
Oh
serious,
yeah,
you know.
it's on
Um,
my list.
but I mean that's what this is to me, because if you think about the houses here that we're working with, it's the Saturn and Aquarius, the technocratic, or if we're going to look at it in a spiritual way, the witness consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think for our purposes, we kind of have to look at it as the technocratic kind of. It's kind of the cold technological. It's like the steel and the metal. Maybe it's like the database or the motherboard or something, right? If you want to look at that metaphor. And
Yeah.
then Uranus and Taurus, right, is like lightning striking the ground of the earth, right? There's something that's very organic about it, something that's very natural, which is weird, right? Because you're seeing Uranus in the house of Taurus, which is ruling the house that Saturn is currently in, but Saturn is also co-ruler, right? In the
Right.
ancient sense, but I would say also in the modern sense of Aquarius. So there's this kind of weird transaction in terms of house rulership that's going on here, where the relationship is happening, and was happening even when Saturn was in Capricorn, perhaps to an even greater extent, right? These are the houses where Saturn is most comfortable, but at the same time, they're also the most remote. These are the most remote realms, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Capricorn is the top of the mountain. It's elite culture, elite society, especially with Pluto in Capricorn, and Saturn in Aquarius is obviously, again, right, we're referring to the technocratic, or we're referring to the witness consciousness, which is also something that's necessarily remote and distant. And so it's incredibly difficult when Saturn is in these houses, especially aspecting Pluto, right? In this sense of the plutocracy, or in the sense of power, right?
Mm-hmm.
To have some sort of like really grounded natural human experience. And I mean, we can see that in Shatner's natal chart with the Saturn and Capricorn. That's a high achieving in the late degrees of Capricorn. That's a high achieving, high striving Saturn. But in the 12th house, opposite Pluto and Mars, it's a high achieving Saturn that is on the polarity point of this axis of the everyday and the eternal, right? So I mean, there's a certain point where that Saturn breaks, and there's no better place for me to describe where Saturn breaks. You could make an argument for Uranus and Aquarius, but I would say Neptune and Pisces, right? It's the transit that we're undergoing right now with the Mars square Neptune.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be Mars, you could be Saturn. Either way, you're walking into the all that is, right?
Yeah.
Saturn doesn't win that fight. Mars doesn't win that fight, right? The bounds and borders and limits of our conceived reality is far trumped by the reality itself, right? Which is necessarily kind of beyond language and beyond conceptualization and beyond structures of meaning. But so too, right? Again, if we're looking at the malefics, right? Saturn, Pluto,
Yeah.
Mars, all of these malefics that are involved in these relationships with this kind of interesting Neptune transit that's going on right now. Mars is at much more of a disadvantage than Saturn is in that relationship. Mars is it's just me. Saturn is, oh, this is all that I believe that is, or this is like the collective as it stands now. But either way, when that tsunami comes, you know, one person or 1,000 people or 10,000 people, the impact is catastrophic and immense. The breakdown and disillusionment, it's interesting that this is news today, because that's where I would read that signature here, and obviously the Saturn Uranus transit, those two squares.
Very interesting. You know, looking at his chart too, at his nodes, I wonder if that's like a kind of a push-pull that he's dealt with in his career, like chasing money and making sure you're successful versus having that more deeper, profound experience and meaning of life. So I almost suspect that it's his south node that even drew him to want to go up into space to begin with.
Well, there you go. Pluto square the nodes. And if we want to go back to the Pluto book, we can see exactly what's going on there.
I'm pretty sure I muted my phone because it never fails. There we go.
You said what about the phone?
Muting my phone. It always seems to go off at like the wrong time.
Hey, it happens. Yeah, this Pluto book is really good stuff. I have Mars square the nodes, so I always look it up in here, but I haven't read about Pluto square the nodes. Pluto square the nodes.
I might have that placement in my chart too. Let me pull that up really quick.
Oh, so you have Saturn and Pluto square the nodes?
I think so.
Jeez.
I know, right?
let me read this while you pull it up. With Pluto square the nodal axis, the individual is in a unique evolutionary situation, equally torn between issues pertaining to the past and the future. This division exists in each moment of the individual's life. This karmic and evolutionary condition indicates that the individual has neither succeeded in totally resolving or learning the issues pertaining to evolutionary past desires, nor the issues reflected in the North Node. Yeah, so this is that, like, just in the basic sense, the square the nodes for any planet is a skip step. But this is like a skip step of the transformation of the soul, like the desires moving forward into a new evolutionary paradigm. Choices that the individual make relative to his or her desires are extremely critical, and they concern the evolutionary journey and progression. Yeah, there you go. You said it. The individual is simultaneously attracted and repulsed by the issues, orientations, and lessons of both nodes.
Oh wow, I hadn't even made that connection with Pluto squaring his nodes. I was just looking at the axis, you know, because it's Libra Aries, which, you know, the self versus balance of you and everyone else. It's a theme right now, right? And just looking at the houses, more importantly, with 8th house being, you know, I don't want to call it necessarily a spiritual house because it feels like that's oversimplifying it. But there are those spiritual elements there, that necessity to dig a little bit deeper into the self, into the psyche, into your experience, and transcend some of those, I don't know, I guess, negative experiences maybe that house has brought you in life. I mean,
so he has Pluto and Saturn square the nodes, and Jupiter.
oh wow,
That's a lot. I mean, and on the launch, right? Saturn and Pluto and Venus and the moon and the North Node and the South Node and Jupiter square his nodes.
holy crap. So it's almost like this lifelong war within self kind of came to its head when he went up in space. That's how I'm taking it.
If you want to talk about transits, this is just like a fucking transit. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, we could read this. It would just take forever to read this. Like, there's just so much shit going on. It makes sense that he like flew up into space. Like, something had to happen.
Yeah.
Let's see where the Mars is in the chart. Yeah, Mars on the midheaven. No. It's not we pulled it back a couple of years to show the Saturn transit. Let me see. 2021, right?
Yes.
Mars is still on the midheaven. That's hilarious. Okay, well, you know, That's astrology.
Yep. Oh, not even just that. It's at the anaretic degree too.
Mhm.
Which, okay, yeah. So something was definitely going to happen because of that. Like, and I've kind of been looking a little bit into like degree theory and trying to make sense of all of that. And I've become maybe a little bit obsessed with the anaretic degrees, mostly because I have one in my chart. But how it represents like this almost karmic ending or karmic beginning, as you will, depending on whether it's the 29th degree or the 0 degree. At least that's how I've been interpreting it. So again, I think this Mars is going to come into play, maybe not right away regarding his experience, but I think that is something that we will see at some point in the near future.
Yeah, it's his second house and
With all of this.
second house and eighth house cusp in the Placidus are on world points. So this suggests there's a world event surrounding these two houses and the interaction here between them. Right, world these are equinox points here.
Gotcha.
Equinox and cross quarter points. So 15 Scorpio, 15 Leo, 0 Aries, 0 Libra. There's a couple more, but those are really prominent ones, right? Like you think of all the pagan holidays, right? They're cross quarter holidays as well as solstice holidays. Yeah, this is a big chart for sure.
Wow. So it's times like this that it makes me really glad that I decided to start taking my astrology studies a little bit more seriously. Because for a while I've just been kind of dicking around, learning my own chart, trying to understand my own experience and everything. And there's so much more to learn going beyond just your own chart. Like I will say that.
Definitely. I'm very invested in like the contemporary transits, so that's something I'm always keeping up with, but definitely personal chart too. Yeah, Chiron conjunct Mercury.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm only like sort of familiar with Shatner. Like I know he did Star Trek and that was like really huge back in the day when that show came on just because of the cast and like the topics and stuff that they broached. But like as far as Shatner's activist history, I am clueless. So I almost wonder if this might be a scenario in where words kind of come back to haunt him with that Chiron there.
What do you mean? Like the things that he said are gonna people are gonna say, why aren't you doing something about it or something?
No, like I'm thinking of things that he's probably said in the past, especially in regards to like, I don't know, environmental movements or the beauty of Earth or the meaning of Earth and our ecosystem or, any of that. And it could be just something as simple as him being like flippant in an interview or something about that, especially looking where his North Node is. I would say that for the majority of his career, he's probably been pretty financially focused, right?
Yeah, so to go off of that, right? I would say this signature to me kind of is like exposing the fake.
Yeah.
Saturn conjunct Pluto transit, Mercury conjunct Chiron transit, right? It's like the way that you've been being and acting, speaking and moving in the world is kind of being, I don't know, kind of torn apart.
Mm-hmm.
Chiron transit is like, I mean, Saturn and Pluto transits are rough, but a Chiron transit, that's, ugh, I mean, we saw that from this moon. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
It fucking sucks. Yeah, conjunct his Mercury, second house, right? House of material.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, is there anything else I'm picking out in here?
I'm seeing the moon Uranus.
Yeah.
Right. That to me again is this is a really kind of ugly emotional situation suggested to me.
That certainly explains like his reaction, his emotional, like I would almost say visceral emotional reaction to what was initially viewed to be this, beautiful thing, this beautiful experience.
Communication, electric, emotional wound.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I really, it might sound just kind of basic, but I just look for conjunctions a lot in the chart. Conjunctions, oppositions, and maybe squares, you know?
Yeah, well,
I,
those are the most powerful aspects, right, in a chart.
yeah, I mean, like stuff like trines and sextiles, right? If I really wanted to do deeper readings and stuff, I'm really just looking for the karmic patterns and like the thrust, you know? So a
Hmm.
conjunction, opposition, and square to me suggests the theme or the nexus of what is going on or what is occurring. Um, so I mean, we've definitely touched on the conjunctions and oppositions here, but I'm sure there's a lot more to dig into. But I think from that, right, you can see the theme.
Yeah,
I'm personally always reluctant to ascribe, right, worldly meaning to the theme, right? I can see energetically what's unfolding, but like if I had seen this, I don't think I would have necessarily guessed that it was going to be the space launch, you know.
right.
I, I
Well,
could I could see it I could see it from the position of his psyche, right? Like there's something going on in his psyche that is extremely disturbing, right? Like this, I can tell this would be a very, very tough period of time to live through, especially with that Saturn return with conjunct Pluto. I mean,
mhm,
period of several years, I think of extreme difficulty and kind of overhauling of the entire way of perceiving and being, and really having to find a new direction and orientation forward. Saturn is very, very fragile in an individual's chart. I mean, I think that's what we're talking about in terms of the fragility of the earth. And what he's really saying is the fragility of himself, right? Like when he's saying that, there's no real separation there. And I mean,
yeah,
if we just want to look at, right, the individual's chart, the kind of border between the personal and transpersonal planets, right? You were saying, uh, Adam Ellenboss was saying that it's
the
Saturn is
liminal.
right? I would say, yeah, if we were talking about liminal, Saturn's the border between the personal and transpersonal
Hmm.
of the chart, right? Jupiter is the interpretation of difference. It's the I don't know. Well, I don't want to go into Jupiter right now. Let's stay focused on Saturn. Saturn again, right? The furthest planet out that we are able to see the cultural limit. That's very fragile, right? Because it's always kind of being broken. You're always having an experience, whether it's a small experience or a large experience, right? Like a Pluto transit, that in one way or another is it's like breaking down a muscle in the gym, right?
Yeah,
Like you could have a huge muscle tear, right? Or you could have just like you're breaking down the muscle fibers little by little, and that's what makes it grow stronger, right? Like that's what Saturn is. Again, Saturn Capricorn, Saturn would be bones, right? Like it's the strength of the bones, and the strength of the bones comes from the daily use of the bones. The things break down and they're rebuilt stronger. That's what Saturn is, right?
right,
That's Saturn work. Um, but I mean, with a Pluto transit to Saturn, right, you run the risk of things breaking down so much that they can't be fixed. Um, and I mean, if they are fixed, they're just totally different. I mean, like a Pluto Saturn transit to me is like, this is something that's transformative in such a way, right? Again, the psychedelic experience is a good example of that. Like it's
mhm,
blowing the doors off. It's not like you're going into the gym and working out and breaking down a couple of muscle fibers. It's like it's blowing the doors off of the building.
right. Yeah, I don't think it'd be possible for him to go through this and not have a transformative experience in some way with Pluto being there.
Right,
It was
right.
all about bringing that stuff up from the depths, which, makes it interesting the fact that he went up into space. But I mean, if you look at, I guess, the Earth, the deepest, darkest depths are the ocean, which is pitch black, and it looks exactly like space does.
Yeah.
So there's almost a mirror effect there, you could say.
Yeah, as a kind of as above, so below. I think it's one of those things. It's like the lower you go, the higher you go, right?
Yeah.
You don't have access to the lower realms without the higher realms, and vice versa.
Hmm.
Let me think. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not the kind of astrologer that would I would be looking for any kind of literal interpretation of the space launch, right? I'd be looking for the emotional and like kind of psychological ramifications of the transits, right? In relation to the natal or in relation to the first event.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, without a doubt, this the Pluto Saturn conjunct on his Saturn return, there's just no again, going back, it keeps doing this to me. It's not that it keeps doing it to me, it's that I'm not using the software properly. Yeah. Again, like he's having this experience while the collective is having the experience. So it makes sense to me that, especially being a public figure, right, that this would emerge as a dominant news theme, right? That he's having this kind of massive transformative Saturn Pluto experience. So it's like a double whammy, really, that's happening here, not only in his own chart, right, but collectively. If you want to look at this, might be interesting for you if you find the planetary nodes useful. Right, this is a little heavy with all the stuff, all the traffic, right? But like, it's important. I don't use them that often because I know where they are, right, at this point, because they don't move.
Right.
They don't move. Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter nodes.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Right. So this is what was happening in a world sense, right? If we're just looking at the transits and the planetary nodes, Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter nodes were all conjunct Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter south node. They were all conjunct their south, the planetary south node of their own signature. Wow,
that's very interesting.
Right. So if you think of the planets as whatever, right, whatever you want to conceive of it, they have their natal, or they have their planetary north node and south node, right? You can see those ramifications in the personal chart or the natal chart, right? You can also see them in relation to the planet by way of the Earth's vision. So, I mean, there's no mistaking, right? If you were just going to look at this, right, you could see this at the kind of regular astrological time level of Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter conjunct in Capricorn for the first time since like 1500 or whatever, and you'd be like, this is crazy, right? But then you also see that they're all conjunct their south node, right? Which is such a huge, it's just like crazy karmic shit. Like that's not like that's not like, you can't really qualify or quantify that as some sort of regular occurrence. But then obviously Shatner, I think, represents in the microcosm, right? If we're looking at, we have Shatner, we have the world, and then we have the planetary nodes themselves. In the microcosm, he's kind of representing by way of this Saturn-Pluto opposition and the Saturn-Pluto conjunction transit, Saturn-Pluto, representing this larger phenomena. So I think it makes sense that this was definitely a big news event, and we're still kind of seeing it unfold a little bit.
Yeah, I'll be curious when his when his book finally comes out. I don't believe it's out quite yet, but when it does, just how much more of this we're going to see, or this energy we're going to see in that book based on his experience.
Yeah, I really like what you said. I'm really resonating with the disillusionment thing. Because I think that's a huge theme that's playing out right now. I don't think he's alone in that. I think that is a collective theme.
Yeah, I agree.
And to hear him describe it in such like emotional terms, right? If we're looking at the way that this space launch unfolded, to hear him describe the experience in such emotional terms, I think is what is resonating with the collective. Uranus, Chiron, Mercury. This experience of the superficiality of the human culture or civilization or society as it stands.
This might come up again for him. I'm looking at his Chiron and how that's only 3 degrees away from Uranus of the space launch. Do I have those charts right?
His Chiron.
Yeah. Third house. Yeah.
With Uranus retrograde right now.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, the transits are 1930. That's not it. Yeah, his Chiron 15. Yeah. So he had Uranus retrograde during, and then Uranus came back over direct, and now is retrograde again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
So
I
yeah,
don't
I
think
think
Uranus.
more might come out about this in some fashion beyond just this book.
Well, it is, right. You got the North Node and Uranus that are still there, so I'm sure it's just literally coming out right now. That makes sense. The variety.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I guess again we have the moon that's coming over this point right now, so it seems like it's an emotional thing right now. Makes sense that we're talking about it. Um, yeah, moon conjunct the Uranus of the event as we are speaking.
Huh. Okay, well, I am not seeing anything else, at least not that I know enough about to talk about.
No, I think we definitely covered it. There's a lot there, but I think it's resonating with the collective right now for good reason. So it makes sense that you brought it up, and good to dig into that and get to some of the themes that I think are unfolding, not only for him, but I think for all of us.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, should we call it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.